Hello, my name is Tom Bentley, and welcome to my office, a 1966 Airstream, good for typing and napping. I'm going to discuss memories and their place in memoirs. I'm hoping you'll stare at the slides rather than at my nervous face. Have you ever tried to think of your first memory? You hear of people remembering their cribs at 6 months, or remembering playing with their first toy as a 1-year-old. Most scientists dispute that, saying that a phenomenon called infantile amnesia prevents accurate or even hazy recall for most people until they are 3 or 4, or even older. You can see that this kid on the left is worried that a great memory of ball dancing with a count is being pushed out in favor of one of her mother giving her castor oil. And the kid on the right's head is swelling because a rash of new memories are shoving out the old. Those early memories don't stick because the memory centers of the brain are still in their big, bust-out formative stage. In those early days, the masses of incoming new memories can disrupt and replace the existing networks of already formed memories. To bring it around to me, my favorite subject, I have a memory of me eating ashes from the fireplace in my living room at age 2. I can see it clearly. It was a sunny afternoon. My mother was entertaining some friends. And when she saw what I was doing, she yelled, "Tommy, stop!" This is me a bit older than 2, though still infantile, in front of that fireplace. I think I remember the ash eating so well because my mother told me the story several times. I grew up in that home and saw the fireplace countless times and could easily picture myself enjoying a lunch of ashes. So I did picture it, and later held that picture as being my first memory. But doubt has crept in, whether that's a memory at all. Science also tells us, when we care to listen, that adolescent memories are more easily consolidated and retained. But what about an old codger's memory, a codger being me, of those cobwebbed adolescent days? Last year I published a memoir of events that mostly happened more than 50 years ago. Those events were primarily accounts of my high school shoplifting business. I say business because for 3 years and counting in high school, I stole and sold all manner of goods. Things like tape players and other small electronics, record albums, lots of liquor, clothes, and all types of little trinkets that amused me. Operated under the banner of sticking it to the man, though it was nebulous to me who the man really was. As a teenager, I had some distinct shoplifting skills, but my ethical development was somewhat stunted. Stupid is as stupid does. That's me around 50 years ago. I do resemble a Sasquatch, but you can see that that's just my brain swelling with new memories, pushing the hair away from my head. You might think that a Sasquatch would be a conspicuous shoplifter, but remember, this was the early 1970s in Southern California, so there were many Sasquatches running about. Those scientific sorts have also said that humans have a negativity bias, where we're more likely to remember dramatic, threatening events than positive ones. Danger makes for sharper memory. Maybe that's why I remember with clarity those several times being caught as a shoplifter, more than I remember all those times getting away with my crimes. I'm lucky in that I still know a lot of the folks, at least 12 of them, from those days. Worried that in trying to write the book, I could have had undiagnosed adolescent amnesia, I consulted with them, emailing passages from the book or the full book in progress and asking for comments. These comments and those on the next slide are extracted from the high number of email exchanges I made. Oh, that one about the FBI is about one of my sister's shady husbands, not my own crimes in Vegas. I could have listed here many more comments that express the same level of dead uncertainty on what happened, when, and to whom. I wasn't the only one who was a bit mushy on the details. As you can see from these slides, there wasn't a tremendous amount of, "That's the date and I'm sure about it," in the reply messages. After reading comments like these, I then put together a timeline that went from 1969 to 1976 and sent that back to my reviewers. Most of them, if not all, thought my timeline had needed some ripping apart and repairing, and more with hammer and nails than Elmer's glue. Not a shock, I suppose. Some people were able to pin down dates and years because they knew they owned certain cars at certain times, or they could date the bright beginnings of love affairs and their cold ends, or they could peg events to graduation dates. Like the day after I graduated from high school, I went to a Grateful Dead concert at the Hollywood Bowl, a memorable evening of frolic and dangerous drugs. That stuck. Some of my friends had diary entries, like one of the ones in this slide. I suppose being stoned and drunk in your PJs isn't all that bad. And some people had printed photos, which often had dates on them back then. So I did the best I could. When there was a sharp dispute about a circumstance, I made a completely impartial decision. I decided I was right. It's not a particularly persuasive approach, but I went with it. However, I am working on a new memoir right now about the 30-plus years of correspondence I had with the Jack Daniel's Distillery and their organization, the Tennessee Squires, and as it turned out, seemingly, with all of the Lynchburg, Tennessee community. I could describe those letters, of which there are well over 100, and the odd things they sent me over the years, but since I've told you I was a thief, you likely think I'm a liar too. So here's some evidence. This letter came shortly after the distillery made me a Tennessee squire and deeded me some distillery land, which turned out to be about 2 inches square. Here's the deed in all its finery. The correspondents in this particular letter want to pick some poke salad on my property and make sassafras tea. Being from the suburbs, my tea always came in little bags, but I told them yes. The letter on the left is warning me about a polecat seen on my property. A polecat is another name for a skunk, if you are as unfamiliar with the word as I was. The letters and weird objects over time included a rabbit's foot, a Tennessee rubbing stone, which I still have, a farmer's almanac, shot glasses, calendars, chewing tobacco, and seen here a snapshot of some precious things collected on my land with a metal detector, a rusty nail, what looked to be metal buttons, and an old piece of pipe. That first letter about detecting was from a woman asking if her son could prospect on my land. And she then wrote her regrets on the back of this photograph and said her son might try elsewhere. That's just one example of the letters that had me scratching my head in confusion and amazement. So I have the documents from Jack Daniels, most of them dated, so there's printed evidence. Most have my address, so I can trace where I was at the time, going from California to Las Vegas, to Seattle, to Micronesia, and back to California. Unfortunately, I have very few of my reply letters, because while I responded to almost all of theirs, I didn't make a copy of what I wrote, particularly in those early days. However, many of their replies directly reference what I wrote, and many of those new replies prompted another reply from me. To sum up, the lesson here is clear. You need to have whiskey to improve your memories. Here's a photo of me thinking about Brussels sprouts. The slide has a few thoughts from people with better names than me that touch on memory and that reflect on the way to the past. I like them all, but don't you think that Mary Oliver one has a great feeling? Be astonished and tell about it. And here are some resources on memoir writing that are helpful. Jane Friedman writes about all things publishing, but if you search for memoir on her site, you'll find all kinds of posts. Mary Carr is famed for memoir advice, and Brooke Warner, the co-founder of She Writes Press, teaches memoir. Oh, and my mother didn't find out about the shoplifting until 40 years later. Her response was, "Tom, what?" You can tell I've matured. I went from Tommy to Tom. Thank you for being here. That picture shows a slice of key lime pie from the Blue Heaven Cafe, which happens to have the best key lime pie in the world. Let's see if I can exit this slideshow without blood and if anyone has any comments or questions. If anybody has a comment, just go ahead and put it in the box. I think that you guys can just put it in chat, but let me see if I click on you, what happens. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, there we go. Oh, from Alice Bourget, who I happen to know personally. How does a person determine that their memoir is really interesting? So many of us feel we have stories to tell. Well, I think one of the essential things about memoir is that it reflects a period of intense happening in your life rather than your life. You aren't going to go from the first pair of tennis shoes you had to the last pair of tennis shoes you had. You're going to go from when your sister whipped you over the head with her tennis shoes, and that started a tennis shoe whipping party among all your family that lasted for 5 months. Now, that might be the subject of a memoir. Not certain I'd want to hear that one, but anyway, yes, we have so many stories to tell, but you do want a concentration of events that have a focus. My shoplifting memoir covers social events that happened during that time from the late 60s to the 70s. However, those are only filler or scenery for the shoplifting itself, the shoplifting events, their consequences, my weird ethical feelings that developed about shoplifting. So you want something that has a beginning and an end, in which there is some kind of focus and a basis. Marjorie, tips for finding a main focus for memoirs, your main hurdle. Again, things that seem to have a thread, issues that have a relationship to one another, where there is not merely an event, another event, another event, another event, but an event that bumps into another event and causes a consequence for that event, or an event that in a collective of events seems to be again, as I said before, a thread. There's something that can be woven that's an actual fabric where you can see, there's a building, and it of course doesn't have to build to something dramatic immediately. There can be a backing away, a building, a backing away, a building, like in how novels are developed. There can be inciting incidents, and then another scene may not be that inciting incident at all, but the inciting incident has caused something that scenes in the future will have a direct relationship to. So in that sense, you really wanted to have a basket of events that aren't just, I have a sponge in the basket, I also have a muffler in the basket, I also have a dictionary in the basket. You want things that when they touch each other in the basket, they all resonate together. Daniel, what suggestions do you have for sticking to the story at hand? Um, I had problems with that myself. I sometimes seem to go on. In fact, some of my sentences seem to go on at length, and they could use a cleaver. Uh, Certainly think about your audience. I mean, you don't want to be telling the tales, your favorite tales from your childhood or wherever the chronology of your memoir is. You want your audience to have a sense of development. You want your audience, and again, like I said about novels, it doesn't always have to be 1, 2, 3. It can sometimes be 1, 3, 1, 7, 1, back to the incident and the consequences of those incidents. But thinking of your audiences, I think, is a helpful way to consider sticking to the story at hand. Um, because you can tell when you're telling a story or in any kind of event when people drift a little bit. They might be looking off to the side, or they might be clearing their throats, or they might be shuffling their feet. They might be ready to go because your story doesn't hold them. So consider the things in a story that hold people. Uh, I've told stories among my friends, the people I've mentioned in the memoirs, many times, and they'll, they'll sometimes go back to the refrigerator to get a beer because they've heard them before. But so my audience, you have to have fresher stories for my old audience. But anyway, considering the audience, I think is a big advantage and what will continue to compel them to move forward in the memoir. Monica, well, that's a very nice thing to say. Thank you very much. Oh, Janet, I wish I saw earlier that you were having audio difficulties. I'm sorry about that. I'm using what is supposed to be a decent microphone, and I had my sound turned up a good deal, but anyway, sorry about that. I don't see any other questions. If anyone has any other question for me, do you want to put it in the talk? Sorry if I keep hunching forward, peering away. Oh, here's one. Oh, should I share the memoir resource slide? Yes. Sorry about that. I'm not certain if Hoppen or Medium are going to give us a chance to give these slides to any of the readers who want to look at them. But anyway, I hope you can read that. What is the best memoir I've read other than my own? Tobias Wolff wrote one called A Boy's Life that I thought was great. Oh, I see there's a Bentley in the audience. Oh dear. How much contact will you have with Jack Daniels during your writing? If you mean bottles of Jack Daniels, I likely will have a lot of contact. But I've actually secured permission from Jack Daniels to publish the letters because they actually own the copyright of letters to me. And I've been in contact with their main PR guy before. I'm hoping to interview them a little bit more about what they're doing now because they're actually releasing a whole bunch of new interesting whiskeys, things they haven't done in the past. Okay, I'm seeing more questions now. Sorry, I haven't refreshed this properly because I'm an idiot with presentations. How do you approach fuzzy memories? From Jana, how do you approach fuzzy memories in writing your memoirs? For instance, you push them in separate directions to fit a narrative. Would the ends justify the means of altered or edited memory? Uh, as I said, and it sounded like it was tongue in cheek, I did end up going with what I thought was right. I'm the writer after all. But fuzzy memories, I really did try to get confirmation from people. And I only showed you a small percentage of the people who wrote to me back in response to my questions of, do you remember this happening this way? And I did get a sense of refinement after time. It was very helpful that I'm still in contact with a lot of the people from those days um, who can tell me I'm an idiot. And I, in the reference to, do I push a memory in a specific direction to fit a narrative? I only push it in a specific direction in terms of some tonal efforts. Like uh, I'm a wise guy in a lot of my writings, so I can find humor in things that perhaps aren't that funny, which means maybe you don't want to be around me that much. But but in terms of justifying the means of altered or edited memory, I really try to go with the best I could, and of course that's the best you can do. Greg Dunn, what do you think about memoirs that include lost memories, such as funerals you don't remember attending or maybe didn't attend, but instead recall odd snippets? Example, visited my uncle in hospital dying of alcohol, but not his funeral. I possibly would explain those as, again, like my memory of being in front of the fireplace eating ashes, which I'm almost certain is not an actual memory, but is just a story I've solidified in my head. I might specify in a memoir that that is the term you're using, a lost memory or something that is manufactured seems to cheapen it a little bit, but something that describes the scene through other people's eyes or is declared to be describing the scene through other people's eyes, but your familiarity is so sharp that you are able to describe it well, but I wouldn't describe it to being a definite memory. Let me see. Daniel, I'm not certain I understand the question. I should have included Marion Roach in the list of memoir resources because she's a big one. I'm not certain what, well, actually, I understand your question. I don't understand what she means when she says the memoir is about X as illustrated by Y to be told in an X. I was very, very bad at geometry in high school. So when I see X's and Y's, I probably only think of words that start with X's and Y's and not formulas. I'm not certain what she means by that. I'm sorry, I can't say. Here you ask, I've self-published 2 memoirs. Is it true that it never gets easier to write them? Goodness gracious, yes, exactly. uh, it's sometimes hard to write anything. Not that I'm the all-suffering being, but I've written a lot of stuff, and I'm trying to write an article right now for an Airstream magazine, and I've written many magazines for the. I've written many magazines. I've written many articles for this magazine, and again, the beginning of it, as always, not having a beginning, puts you at the blank page state, and there's a freezing. It doesn't seem to get any easier to write for me, but you're in good company. It seems to be the case for writers of all kinds, even the ones. I was reading about John Steinbeck before he published Grapes of Wrath. His notes that are like diary entries, they may indeed be diary entries, are incredible. They are, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. Not certain if I should continue with this. Doesn't seem to be working for me. Probably no one's going to read this. It's Grapes of Wrath. So, like I say, you're in good company. I'm not good at refreshing this page. Let me see if there's anything new. I do not think so. If anyone else has another question, please put it in. The show's going to be over in 5 minutes, and I'm going to go collapse. But I do appreciate all the questions. I very much appreciate the viewers. Those are you people, and this has been fun, I think. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I very much appreciate you being here. I'm going to be working on my newest memoir soon. I actually am already working about it. I'm babbling a little bit, but I'm hoping I'll get that information out. I'll probably put on Medium itself. You can subscribe to my Medium channel, and you'll see some notice about that memoir, as well as other absurd things I've written on Medium. I've written a fair amount of posts there. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to end this session. I'm going to make sure no one else has written anything. Doesn't appear to be. Okay, well, see ya.